Hi, I'm Michael Fields, and welcome to our weekly examination of the media. As ever, I'm here with my colleagues from App State's Department of Communication, Heather Page Preston, Frank Aycock, and David Spiceland. We have a full program, so we need to get started. This one's going to be a little weird. We're going to talk about Caitlyn Jenner. We're going to speak about Bill Cosby. And then we're going to finally end up with the debates. I'm not sure which of these will end up being the more tasteful subject or topic. But first, Caitlyn Jenner. I was of the belief, and I was hopeful, that Bruce Jenner's transgender conversion and all the publicity and the media related to it, had some noble purpose, that he was going to help the transgender community deal with the rest of society and also with themselves, and relate some of the things that he had been going through all these years. I'm disturbed to note that not only was he a big part of the Kardashian TV shows, which were something less than tasteful, and now he is presiding over his own show, which is, Heather tells me, has had 2 episodes already on TLC, the Learning Channel. They don't call it the Learning Channel anymore, with good reason. It seems that this is just another one of those exploitative, is it exploitative or exploitive? Whatever. And that this is being done for fame and money. Heather.
I have no idea what is the motivation for this. I've not seen this, but I will tell you that from what I've read and what I've heard is that the hope was that it would raise the profile of transgender people in the U.S., that it would give them the courage that they need to go through the process and to deal with the pushback from society, that it would raise the profile in mainstream society to a point where it would be more acceptable to most people. I don't know, the jury still may be out on that. I can tell you that my research showed that between the first episode that aired on the 26th of July and last Sunday's episode, that the show lost half of its real-time viewing audience. That's not the DVR audience, but the real-time viewing audience. And that was attributed to a conservative statement that Caitlyn Jenner made about people's dependency on welfare.
So it wasn't, it had nothing to do with transgender.
The context of the welfare statement was the services that transgender people use when, the need for welfare in order to access the services that they need to make the transition. That people who don't have the income, unlike Caitlyn Jenner, right, who don't have the high-profile activist friends like Caitlyn Jenner does, they don't have the means or the resources to go through the process without some assistance.
So he was advocating for some assistance?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, the premise was yes, but it quickly, apparently, from what I've read, devolved into a discussion of dependency, that people become dependent on welfare.
Interesting.
Yes.
One of the more
Frank?
interesting things about it is it seems like we're playing this up as if Caitlyn Jenner is the first well-known person to go through a transgender situation.
But
and
not
that's
true.
not the truth. No, you can go back to I think it was 1970s, where Dr. Robert Richards,
The tennis
Richard
player.
Roberts, who was a
No,
doctor,
Richard
Roberts,
I think was the last name.
and he went through the transgender change and became out as a female tennis pro by the name of Renee Richards, okay, and who competed at the same time along with Martina Navratilova,
Billie Jean.
Billie Jean King, Chris Everett, and that era. And there was a big discussion at that time as to whether or not the fact that Renee Richards was a transgendered person, but is it going to be fair to the women, because she had been a man for so long and had men's muscles and things along those lines. As it turned out, I don't think she ever won a tournament, or if she did, it was a very small one or something along those lines, so that really didn't come into play. But we have a tendency to forget that, and we forget that the big discussion was not over the fact that she was transgendered, although there was to a certain degree, but not to the extent that we're focusing on it with Caitlyn Jenner. It was more a question of
The sports.
the sports aspect of it.
Yeah.
There was another very famous one who went to Sweden, I think in the late 50s or 60s, and I can't remember her name. But that was the first real media sensation about transgenderism. And again, her intent was to spark a legitimate conversation about this. And of course, there were no cable channels then and so forth. And so I don't think
Social
she had to
media.
really,
Yeah,
that's right, I don't think she
absolutely.
really had the opportunity to exploit her situation. And Renee Richards really tried to pull back and to escape some of the notoriety connected with her. This
the same-
seems very different.
Yes, I would agree with you on that. Right down to the fact that at least the pictures that I've seen of Caitlyn Jenner, 65 years old and dark hair. You know, I don't know, my wife is almost 65 and she has salt and pepper hair. You see the color of mine, and I'm in my early 60s. So the fact that she has, that she looks like, at least in the picture I'm looking at right here, she looks like she's about 40.
And,
And
really
and
highlighting her
yeah.
her assets.
To me, the more interesting conversation in all of this that isn't getting as much airplay or print is the fact that, you know, Caitlyn Jenner is equipped to talk about all transgendered people because of why. She has resources like you can't believe. She does not go through what the majority of transgender people do in order to become who they see themselves as, how they identify. The other part of this story is the hyper-feminization of her presentation.
Exactly.
That is not the average woman.
She was on the cover of what, Vogue or one of the fashion magazines, and she certainly
Vanity
is not
Fair.
the average, Vanity Fair,
Yeah.
certainly not the average 65-year-old woman. David?
Oh, please.
We've been waiting for this. Go ahead.
For me, I would like to see a discussion, maybe not here, but some thought about the media as cheerleader. What do the media, and there's lots of different media, there's lots of different cheerleading going on, but in terms of cheerleading transgender issues. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just saying that I think people need to realize that the media has, and I'll use the word again, an agenda. We can call it cheerleading. I am concerned about people who may disagree with this lifestyle, or however you want to phrase it or whatever, and protecting those views, even though they may not be in sync with where society may be going, so long as they are respective of people. And I don't know if that's necessarily happening, particularly as the media becomes a cheerleader.
Since when?
In this case.
Yeah, since when has the media protected anybody other than the dominant hegemonic, right? The media
has always been a cheerleader. Fox News is cheerleading a particular political avenue. You've got MSNBC, Lord knows where MSNBC is going now, but they've always been a cheerleader.
Do you think that, except on its editorial page, do you think that the New York Times is a cheerleader? Today's New York Times.
On the stories that they choose to publish, the stories they choose to ignore. I mean, it's always been that way.
Oh, I don't know that I agree with that. What I see happening is a representation that bucks the normative view of society that has been perpetuated by the media. And I don't have a problem with the media showing me an alternative view. If I don't like that alternative view, I can turn off the television, change the channel, go to another outlet. So to me, that's not cheerleading, that's presenting an alternate view. News, or media representation of news, is a report on change. Change makes people uncomfortable.
Okay,
And we are talking about change here in its most ultimate form.
I read this article. Is there anything critical about what Caitlyn Jenner did.
Well,
No.
this article is really intended to be a review of her new series.
Yes.
Although it certainly does not do that. It
But to
doesn't deliver
interview
on
somebody
that.
who says, I don't like the show, or the show's ratings are, although, you know, the jury's still out on that. But
I think that it's indicative of something that James Ponizoak, I've never known how to pronounce his name, is the television critic for Time magazine. And this was intended to be a review, yet no place that I can see does he really give a review of the program. It's all about Caitlyn and transgenderism.
If you want a critique of the show, there's actually a site, Vulture, that you can go to, and it has a discussion between a transgendered woman who is a musician and an artist and a journalist, female journalist who is not transgender. And they get at the heart of the matter. They get at the issues of societal importance, which is, why do we think this is the way women look? Why do people who transition to female present themselves in this way, whether they have a television show or not? That's the interesting part of that for me.
But I would also like to have heard what you're talking about there is for that other person who is the transgender that's gone the other way.
From female to
From
male.
female
Yeah.
to male. And we have a very personal relationship along those lines because one of our faculty members, who's no longer here, but a number of years ago, went through that change from female to male. But we don't hear about that.
Yeah.
And we need to hear about that as well.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that you put Caitlyn Jenner, Renee Richards,
The show I Am Jazz.
I Am Jazz.
Yeah.
It's always one direction. It's always male to female.
I hadn't thought about that, but
Yes.
you're
It'd
really
be nice to see.
absolutely right.
We'd be nice to be able to see the other side, female to male, because I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure that this one person, whose name I'm not going to say, is not the only one that's gone through this in the 50 years or so, however long it's been since
this
they've
has
started
been-
doing this.
Let's move on because I want to show something that brings the Cosby debate, if it is a debate, that shows it. We don't have to get a close shot of this. This is this is New York Magazine. Again, it seems to be my greatest source for our topics here. These are 35 of the women who were allegedly sexually abused by Bill Cosby. Inside, we see lots and lots of pictures of these women. They're all done they're all dressed in white, except one who's in a light gray. And they all tell their stories about their encounters with Bill Cosby. It's, as Heather pointed out to me, it was really tough to read.
It is tough reading.
Let's talk about, first of all, are we dealing here with this number of people who've come out with a serial rapist? And secondly, what all of a sudden has caused all of these women who have lived with this secret for many, many, many years, some for 25, 30 years, to all of a sudden this flood of people? What's behind all of that?
I wasn't able to read it because, like I said before we went on air, it kept turning upside down.
Well,
so
those are my
And I'm not being
scanning
critical.
skills.
Yeah.
I hope you're not.
But
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But are any of these, and I'm just asking, are any of these celebrities?
No.
And I wonder if that may have something to do with it, if one or two had been
This
celebrities.
is-
Actually,
this
one or
few
two,
actually-
one or two are. One's a supermodel, and I can't remember what the other.
Yeah, one was a supermodel, and her name I'll come up
Yeah.
with in a second.
Sorry.
And then
No,
there
go
was
ahead.
one that was a Playboy bunny. Remember?
Oh, there
that
were
as well.
several
Yeah,
Playboy
yeah.
bunnies, and in fact, if you remember, Cosby and
Hefner.
Hefner were very, very close, very tight. Now, I guess we know why. They served each other's. I don't know. Why are all these women coming out now after all this, holding this information back for so many years?
Oh,
Heather?
It's the power of social media. You have that break from traditional gatekeeping methods. where the story wasn't so much with the women as it was with, oh, Cosby's been accused, this cultural icon has been accused. So protecting that dominant view of a well-loved entertainer, right? Social media breaks those barriers. Social media allows stories to get out, and when you allow a story to get out and you recognize yourself in what you're reading, it empowers you. Yeah, and there's also been a generational shift of young women who have seen all of these horrible repercussions that happen to women who have been assaulted, who publicly state that. And they see this on social media, and they take to social media in order to say, this isn't right. We've got to stop this. Why is this still happening?
So social media is providing them a platform that didn't exist
absolutely,
before.
absolutely. And these women have the opportunity to recognize that there's more than one, they're not alone, and that they have power again.
And I would also suggest that there's been a change in the culture
Oh,
as
absolutely.
well. I was looking through here. 19 of the 35 women who are on this picture were before 1980. Now you think about it. You go back to the 60s and 70s. The notion of rape was something entirely different. In fact,
Very
you mentioned
different.
in here, rape was a man holding a woman down at a knife and committing a violent act. Okay, the idea of date rape, the idea of acquaintance rape was something that was not thought of. Okay,
I don't
today,
even think the term date rape
I don't even think
been
no,
invented. No, it
exactly.
hadn't.
That's a modern term.
Yeah.
So for a lot of these women, for them to even suggest something like that would have been just unheard of.
We have 1 minute. David, it's up to you.
Well, I said before, I've always liked Bill Cosby. He is somebody who I respected, and a lot of it was the TV show and the books that he wrote or whatever. And I'm not saying this didn't happen, because it did. But it's the sort of thing that you put your faith in people, whether it's Bill Cosby. We've had at least one presidential candidate who had, during the campaign, somebody who was in charge of bimbo eruptions, because there were women who were coming out saying, he raped me or took sexual, whatever. And
Well, we had one even in the White House.
yeah, and through the years, oh yeah.
More than one.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure, but well, we're going to revisit this, I'm sure, again, because this has got to be a continuing story. But let's now talk about our kind of reflections on the great debate of last week.
Debate or a master class of how to dismiss legitimate issues in society.
That too.
Okay.
Give me your feedback. What did you think of it?
Oh, that wasn't enough to let you know.
Well, I sort of knew anyway.
Yeah, I knew you did. I don't know. It certainly delineated where people fall on the spectrum, from the most misogynistic, dismissive, to people who actually might be able to talk about issues and in a political way, as opposed to a personal way. It certainly was a ratings drawer, so it's entertainment to a large
it was
extent.
A huge
Yes.
rating success.
Yes.
Tell me something. Did you come away with it changing your view of anyone?
No,
Higher, lower?
No.
Pretty much the same.
pretty much the same. Yeah.
Frank?
Speaking of statistics, I'll be the one to throw out some
You're the
statistics.
statistician,
I'm
okay.
the stats person, yes. This was the biggest cable audience ever for a non-sports event. 24 million people viewed this. Most television primetime network shows barely get 20 million.
Mm-hmm.
They got 24 million, okay? After the debate, there was a CNN poll. It did not hurt Trump. Trump still stayed first, but look who came up second, third, and fourth. Ben Carson, second. Ted Cruz, third, and Carly Fiorina, fourth.
Who wasn't in the
Who
10?
was not in that, but had such a good debate in the warm-up debate that she popped up there. Interestingly enough, Donald Trump, as you might imagine, said the most words during the debate. Ben Carson, as you might believe, was down near the bottom.
Said the fewest number of words.
Next to the last, yes. But get this, Right above him and right below him were the two that engaged in the biggest battle of the night, Chris Christie and Rand Paul. Despite the fact you think about them being on there, they really didn't have much to say in terms of words that they spoke. The three biggest ones were Donald Trump by far, some 800 words more than the second place, but Marco Rubio was second, and Scott Walker was third. Now, these statistics come from the Wall Street Journal and the International Business Times, so it's not like I'm pulling it out of the Inquirer or something like that.
All right, heaven forbid. David.
A couple of things. Going back to what Heather said, TV, good TV, is drama, whether it's news or not. So if you know, beforehand it was what's Trump going to say, what's he going to do? He downplayed, I'm not a very good debater or whatever, which is baloney. So he was setting the stage, apparently. But there was a couple of interesting things that I noticed, and a little different than what we're talking about. One is there was an app that, and I didn't have enough time to load it, but Fox News was harping an app that people could load and then indicate their preference for a particular candidate. I've never seen that before. I don't know if that's the wave of the future to where we have social media engaged in some of these debates. If you want to call them a debate, it was high drama. The other thing I was watching was who shook hands with who after both debates.
Well, they were practically an end zone apart from each other.
Well,
some of them literally, after. Okay.
After the debate,
Okay, after.
To see maybe who might have liked who or not liked who, and some of the family members came up as well. But you know, I tell my students that politics is kind of like a wrestling match. And I remember when I was in television and they would have these wrestlers come in and, oh, we'll kill you, and I will kill you. And they get in the ring and they beat up on each other. And then afterwards they got in the car and went to lunch together. And you would be surprised at the politicians who, and I don't know particularly for the debates, who will act like they don't like someone else who really they may be very good friends. For instance, Paul Simon, Democrat in the Senate, and also the late North Carolina Senator, and I just dropped the, anyway, the
Very famous one?
very
Jesse
famous
Helms?
Jesse Helms.
Yeah.
Jesse Helms and Paul Simon were extremely good friends.
Couldn't have been more politically.
Exactly.
apart, yeah.
Had lunch with each other a lot. And I got this from a student who worked in Jesse Helms' office. So a lot of times it seems to be drama. Who we think doesn't like somebody might not necessarily be true.
It would be nice to know who went out for cocktails with Donald Trump after the debate. I don't think there were many fans
I'd be
there.
willing to bet you they were lining up to go out with him.
You think?
I do think so, yes. I kind of like what Dave said, and I agree with it, that it is more high drama than anything else.
Absolutely.
What I found interesting was that the people who seem to come across as the winners or the top people are all people who have no chance of getting the nomination.
Maybe they're
This-
more at ease because they have nothing to lose.
Maybe so, but it's interesting to see when you think about it. Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Carly Fiorina, Ben Carson. You put those five together, there's not a single one of them in there that really has a chance. Marco Rubio may have a chance for vice president position, depending on who becomes the presidential candidate for the Republicans. But the others really have no chance to get it. And the ones who had the best chance of making it as the Republican candidate for president really showed rather poorly in comparison.
Does anybody here have a quick explanation for what's happened to Jeb Bush?
In terms of what? He seems to be doing well in the
he's-
polls.
He should have been. I mean, I would think that just for the entertainment value that it's explainable that he at this far out is number one. But Bush really isn't being talked about very much and doesn't seem to be making very much of an impression and seems to be even losing ground a little bit. I mean, this is, after all, a serious political candidate who is likely to be The Republican nominee.
And one of the reasons is who gets the money, who is funded. Of course, Trump apparently is very well funded with his own fortune.
Well, Bush has oodles
Yes.
of money.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's
Well-
raised a ton of money.
And I understand that in the first debate, the former Texas governor,
Rick Perry.
has.
You have to be on this panel if just for the failing memories all around you. Go ahead. Yes.
Well, but apparently he is not paying some of his staff. He's running out of money. And that could mean the end of his campaign and the end of anybody else's campaign that doesn't have the money. It's about money.
Oh, it's always about
Yeah.
Which
There's
is
1 minute left.
I'm going to ask a quick question. Who do you think won
The debate?
the debate? Out of the 10 that were up there, who do you consider the winner of the night?
What criteria are we using?
I would have said Megyn Kelly.
Whatever you,
Yes.
whatever you,
Absolutely.
whatever viewpoint you want to take, who to you was the person that came out that you would have said this is the winner?
Go. You take. Then I'll.
No, you go first on this one.
I think clearly Trump won the debate. Nobody thought that he could pull it off. He could hold his own with a stage full of professional politicians, which most of them are. And he surprised everyone. Everybody thought that he would come off as somebody who was really uninformed and truly not belonging in that company. And he came off almost untouched. He was able to divert that. We have 20 seconds.
Yeah. I would agree with you on that.
Dave?
I wish we had more time.
We don't?
There's another issue, and that is the questions that were asked. And some of the questions were hard-hitting. Some said they were unfair. I think people expected a cakewalk for Fox News, a conservative, libertarian-type network, to have very softball questions. That didn't happen.
Well, I think it, and I think that it was just the opposite. And we were talking about
Yeah.
that before. We'll talk about it later. That's about all the time we have for this edition. It seems that we always, every week, run out of time. Join us next week. This conversation and some others will continue. We hope you'll join us for the media.